sheet in the back, please.
But it definitely helped.
That looks like it.
Yeah.
The green card, so if you wish to speak. And when we, as we go through this, we'll do public comment for both moratorium. Those items will be at the same time. So we're going to have one public comment. We're going to read both ordinances in one public comment. The votes will be separate on the council part. Okay, but we haven't started yet, so if you will, please sign that card.
1 minute to go.
1 minute. The mics are on. Littleton City Council meeting for February 4th.
2020.
February 4th, 2020. I do know that. All right. Had to make sure of the date. Okay. If you would, roll call.
Mayor Valdez, Mayor Pro Tem Malin,
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll,
Here.
Councilmember Elrod,
Here.
Councilmember Fay,
Here.
Councilmember Grove,
Here.
Councilmember Milliman.
Here.
All right, we have quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right, council, we have the agenda in front of you. Do we have any changes? Seeing none, we'll move forward. All right, if we could go into our reports. We have anything for the city manager?
No report, Mayor.
Yes.
No report from the city attorney's office.
I didn't even ask. Okay, but fine.
He's
Okay.
an overachiever.
All right, he is. And we'll go to the city council. Let's start with Kelly.
Thanks to everybody that came out and braved the weather tonight. We appreciate it, and no report.
Cool.
The Historical Preservation Board met last week, and I wanted to bring you up to date on some of the things that they're working on. They have a resolution for a Littleton Legacy, which is a plan to become aware of historical properties in the Littleton area and encourage property owners to consider when they make changes to their property to keep the historical features in mind, and also maybe even consider landmarking. And they're starting with downtown, which corresponds with what we're doing with the Envision plan. So there's opportunity to coordinate with them and to learn from what they're doing. 3 of their members went to a conference last week called Saving Places, where people that are interested in saving historical locations in their cities get together and have a series of workshops, and then they bring that information back, and it helps with their strategic plan and their work plan. And they're continuing to work on getting more property owners in downtown Littleton to opt into the district, so that's all good. Second thing I wanted to mention was the Next Gen group, since we got consensus from council to continue on with that group. They are going to get ready to recruit, and I was wondering if any other council member wanted to help me interview. It takes about 3 hours. Staff usually sets up those interviews, and it'll happen sometime in April, and I think we can work around schedules. So if anybody's interested,
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
All right, well, thank you.
So we need two, there you go, two.
Oh, it sounds wonderful, and I'll coordinate with you on dates, and we'll coordinate with staff on that. That's all.
Carol.
I'd like to report on a group that I haven't reported on before, even though I've been serving on it as a council liaison for a couple years. It's a community service block grant. It has to do with distributing money from the federal government to Arapahoe, through Arapahoe County, for people who are in need of help with housing. An important thing to note is that everybody who receives help through this has to income qualify. They have to prove that they actually need the help. The group is made up of an interesting combination of a representative from South Metro Housing Group, Aurora Housing, Arapahoe County, can't talk today, Community Resources, and a couple residents of low-income housing who live in low-income housing. So this last year, that grant provided help to 93 persons to help them avoid being evicted. And one of they have to have the great chance that they will actually be able to get back on their own feet through this help. So the first month they get 3 months help. No. The first month they get 100% help on rent, and then they get less the next month, and next the last month, and the idea being that they're on their own feet. A typical recipient of this is somebody who's a victim of domestic violence and suddenly has a life change. And there is an interesting service provided called the Homemaker that provides someone to come in the house of typically an elderly or disabled person to help them with household chores so that they can stay in their own house rather than going to a facility that's more expensive. And that was 330 households this year. Then the second thing I want to announce is that District 3 citizen meeting will happen at 9:30 on Saturday, February 22nd at the Wilmore Garden Center. That's it.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I wanted to thank everybody that came out to the City Council retreat. We appreciate you guys tuning in and keeping an eye on us. I also wanted to mention a couple weeks ago I attended the Kids Safe Child Safety Center. It sounds like it was a ribbon cutting. It was actually in an Allstate office that's owned by Pat Donlin. And what it is allows kids to go in there, get fingerprinted, and their picture taken. Nothing's put on the computer. Everything's wiped as soon as the child walks out. It's a 30-second process. I took my child over there who was going to study abroad and got her fingerprinted and photo, and then you fill in the rest of the blank, you know, hair color, all that type of stuff. This is open year-round. It's available to anybody. It doesn't have to be just kids. And anytime the agency's open, they're located at 6901 South Pierce Street. So in Littleton, just basically Pierce and Coal Mine. So that was, I think, a really neat service that Pat and his Allstate agency is doing. Thank you.
I have two quick things. I attended the opening reception for the Fine Arts Board show taking place at the Littleton Museum. It's opening outward, and the artist is Jeff Glode-Wise. I encourage everyone to go visit. It's going on until March 1st. A really impressive and lovely show. It's actually his largest collection here in Littleton. So that says a lot about our museum and the quality of work that is coming there. It is stone, wood, and iron, very substantial pieces that feel like they float. There's also a piece on exhibit outside on the Littleton Museum property, which is the first time we have an exhibit outdoors as well. So I encourage everyone to go check it out. It's really great. And good work being done by the museum and the Fine Arts Board. Second, I attended the Economic Forecast Breakfast that was hosted by South Metro Chamber of Commerce. Really well attended businesses, policymakers, And it was really encouraging to see, there was a presentation from the Denver EDC, and the Denver EDC, no, the Denver Chamber, I should say, is the organization that serves as kind of the central point of attracting businesses to the whole greater Denver region. So it's not just Denver, it includes all of the suburbs as well. And in their promotional video, they actually talk about Littleton. So it was nice to see Littleton be a very prominent part of that. You know, some interesting data and facts that I'll share once presentations are available to me, that I will share with the rest of council. It's kind of a state of the union for the state of Colorado as it relates to business climate and economic opportunity.
Thank you. Pro Tem.
I went to the South Platte Working Group meeting on January 23rd, and they've been working with a consultant to do some design work for some of the east-west trail connections along the South Platte River corridor. And believe it or not, the consultant, at the end of their work, had about $90,000 left over, and the group decided to put that money toward additional design work on the Slaughterhouse Gulch underpass here in Littleton.
Thank you. All right. First, I want to point out, new artwork. Is that what that is? Does anybody know what, tell us something about that? That's brand new, isn't it? Did anybody else notice it, or was it just me and my keen eye?
It was, it's
Which piece?
Which piece? Pat wants to know. Patrick wants to know.
been there about a couple of months.
It's only been there for about 8
Couple of
months.
Couple of months.
Yeah.
Ralph Nagel. Ah, it's nice. It's nice. Excellent, cable top. Thank you very much.
Good observation.
First, I want to just point out our IT department and the support that they give. I know many of us go in there from time to time when we have computer issues. They were able to walk me through the phone yesterday on a couple issues, and I was in there again today. And I just want to give kudos to that department. I think all the support that they give us is fantastic. Also, congratulations to Tiffany and the finance department for receiving the award, a Certificate of Achievement for Excellent in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association. So congratulations. Also, I attended the Mayor's Caucus, or the Transportation meeting regarding with the Mayor's Caucus that I attend. And we are working on right now the regional transportation plan, because right now it's there's like 50-some jurisdictions. So we're looking at now maybe having a sub-plan for each for Littleton, and, you know, something that affects our traffic immediately going through here. It'll be easier to coordinate. The other one, too, I did attend the Transportation Mobility Board meeting a week or two ago, and I want to, again, kudos to our staff. I think the folks that you had there, they were so well prepared, and the information they shared was incredible. Among the information they shared with us at the meeting was the regarding traffic accidents for 2019. So, and I think that was excellent information. If you could maybe share that with all council members, it shows some of the intersections were of most concern. All right, that is it for me. For citizens' appearances, we have no guest citizens tonight or public presentations. We do have public comments. And this is for items that are not on the agenda. Public comments is an opportunity to express your opinion or ask questions regarding issues that are not part of the public hearing on tonight's agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The City Council is not authorized by the Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss, comment, or take action at the meeting on any issue raised by public comment that is not part of tonight's agenda. The mayor may refer the matter to city manager and/or city attorney for immediate comment after public comment, or to staff to obtain additional information and report back to city council as appropriate. We expect comments to be civil, disrespectful, or disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. And we do have on tonight, starting out, we have Sandy Topkoff. You, please come on down. And after that, we have Ms. Chadbourne. That's all we have signed up.
Okay, gang, this is my first time I finally got my butt to a meeting.
If you will, please give us your name, your address.
Yes,
got 3
so
minutes.
I'm Sandra Mealens, and I live at 2566 West Alamo Avenue. And I've been there for a few years, and I'm looking at purchasing Grandma's house that's over on Crocker Street. So I'm planning on staying in Littleton because I love it. I'm probably a little bit emotional about this because I just found out that you guys, somebody, I don't know who approved this, might be leveling the neat little architecture building and the Irish store that is no longer there and putting a multi-unit complex there. And I hear that the feed store is going to be torn down in the future and have another multi-unit complex there. And it's up to you guys. You are the ones that we vote in to protect our little town and our lifestyle, and that's why Littleton is attractive to people, because it feels like a small town. And every time another big apartment building is put on top of a little house, it has a really big impact. It has an impact on the way the city feels. It has a really bad impact on our traffic. The traffic's, you know how it is. I don't know if any of you live in downtown Littleton. It's pretty bad. The parking situation, it doesn't help our parking situation. My friends that are in Highlands Ranch, they don't want to come shopping here because they can't find a place to park. And you know this has been going on for a long time. And the more people that we add to downtown, it doesn't help us at all. So I'm hoping that you guys can see to put a moratorium on the building, additional apartment complexes for a while at least. And when you do a moratorium, please don't do like Lakewood did and say, we're going to do a moratorium.
We're going to be discussing moratoriums, but that's,
Okay,
so if you're going to speak about it now, you won't get the opportunity later.
that's okay. I'll spit it out now because I'm emotional about it. So if you are going to do a moratorium, don't let 20 or 50 or 90 building permits cram in there right before you do it. And if you're going to let something go in, be built, make sure there's a setback. Don't let somebody exploit our little town and build a complex that's right up to the big retirement community. Don't cram something right up next to the sidewalk where it's a danger to us. I don't know how to say, it's killing our home, and we do not want to live in the new Highlands. So please protect our downtown Littleton. That's really all I have to say, except that we do watch what you vote for, so we will be campaigning against the people who vote to let our little town get ruined, and we don't want to lose our events, and that's another thing that happens. When we bring the big businesses in, we can advertise that it's great to bring new business, but we lose our events, and the businesses don't do well because there's no place to park.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. And Chadbourne, are you here? You're here just for open meeting, right? Public, not the moratorium. Correct. Thank you. I'm sure you'll be back.
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here. So this kind of follows on with the well-stated opinion of the person who showed up for the first time here. And that is the Envision process is kicking off its second phase next week. And there are fatal flaws in these products that we have now and in the process. And false claims are being made, and I would like to speak about those. So this is not a unified vision. There is nothing about the future land use map or the comp plan that is unified for the city. No part of this was brought to any neighborhood or any group of citizens. A huge document was presented for 1 month, and during that month, the City Council and Planning Commission both changed the document, which the citizens had no chance to review or understand. It is a technical document, and that was never explained to the citizens. So there is no unified view captured in the comp plan and the future land use map. And that captures, I think, the fatal flaw of this first step, and that is that you folks set out to make a document, and you succeeded. You made a document. That's not a hard thing to do, but it is not what Littleton needs. A city is a technical system of integrated enterprises. And if you can't show us, if staff can't show us, the integrated functional systems and how they work together and what they're going to look like in 40 years, then you have not delivered a shared vision of what our future is. If you had that, you could document it in the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, but you do not have that. You have not brought that to us. Now, an example of that, and I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to disagree, is that the staff presentation at Transportation Master Board, Mobility Board was horrible and deficient. That's because it wasn't integrated. They had a flat list, 7-page list of 96 some projects that add up to millions and millions of dollars, and that's it. They asked the folks on the board to review it. Now, I'm sorry, the staff has an obligation, the staff has an obligation to integrate those projects, maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 scenarios over, 5, 10, 15, 40 years? I don't know. And that's what we never saw in the larger project either. We have no integrated understanding of what this city is going to look like in 30 years, so you haven't captured that in a comp plan. It's just a bunch of opinions by a few folks with special access. So this is a broken process and a broken product, and I'll probably talk more about it in the future. Thanks.
And just for the unofficial record, you're not the first to disagree with me today. Okay. That's it for those that have signed up. Do we have anybody else? Mr. Atwood.
Good evening. My name's Frank Atwood. I live in the 4th District, and my wife at one time served on the Fine Arts Commission here in Littleton, and I'm now watching I think it's called Arts and Culture board be formed, and idle curiosity will be what the relationship between these two might be. And the arts and culture, when I heard it discussed in the study session, sounded far more like the Business and Industry Commission that got dissolved 7 years ago, I believe, and now seems to be resurfacing. So I look forward to seeing what the relationship will be. Thank you. I think the issue is patrons versus super patrons versus artists. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else that would like to speak? I know we have a couple of high school guys here tonight. What high school? Mullen? Are you here for, because you're supposed to come here? And your teacher's name is? So, Mrs. Christensen, you have 2 of your students here tonight. It's official. Good job, guys. Did you want to come down and say anything? Cool, thank you. All right, then we'll move on to, where are we here? Up to our consent agenda. We have one item tonight, and that is ID number 20-043, approval of the January 21st, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Council?
I make a motion to approve the January 21st regular meeting minutes.
We have a motion.
Second.
A second.
Second. All right, council, if you're ready to vote, the yes vote is to approve the minutes. No is not approve. So we got everybody on there. Great.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move. We have no general business tonight, but we do have under item number 9, ordinances on second reading. We have 3 items. Our first item is ordinance number 06-2020, an ordinance on second reading repealing the Columbine Square Urban Renewal Area and abolishing the Littleton Investment for Tomorrow Urban Renewal Authority. Staff, do you have a presentation?
Yes, Mayor and City Council. As you said, the purpose of this ordinance is twofold. One, it would repeal the Columbine Square Urban Renewal Area, and 2, it would disband the city's Urban Renewal Authority, LIFT. A brief history, if you will. This is the Columbine Square Urban Renewal Area that the city formed in November of 2014. In December of that year, 2014, the city and LIFT, the Urban Renewal Authority, entered into a cooperation and loan agreement. And what that cooperation and loan agreement did is it essentially allowed LIFT the ability to borrow up to $200,000 from the city for the purpose of defraying some of their administrative costs as an urban renewal project hopefully came in. Over the course of this particular agreement, as I said, they borrowed $150,000 right now. Additionally, the repayment term was that on December 16th of 2019, LIFT was due to repay the city those monies that they had been advanced. Prior to doing that on December, it was in November, the city met to discuss amending the terms of that loan agreement so that the city could extend the terms of that loan agreement so that repayment would not have to be done. Some of the terms that the city agreed to in terms of that amendment were requiring LIFT to obtain an executive director and LIFT repaying some of the monies that had already been advanced to the city. That was presented to LIFT on December 12th of 2019, and LIFT convened to discuss that amendment. It was at that time that the board decided to table that indefinitely. So they did not vote on amending the terms or accepting the terms of that amended loan agreement. Essentially, I would paraphrase and say that I don't believe that LIFT felt as if they were being put in kind of the best opportunity for success to have to repay that money, at least all those monies at that point in time. And so what they wanted to do was to renegotiate the terms of that loan agreement. So December 16th, 2019 came and went, and they were technically in default on the repayment to the city's of the city's loan. On January 7th of this year, City Council was convened for a study session where discussion regarding the future of Columbine Square Urban Renewal area as well as LIFT took place, and the direction that was provided was for staff to prepare an ordinance repealing the urban renewal area and abolishing LIFT. So February 4th we had is today, and this is second reading. In terms of what would happen going forward if the council acted on this, currently LIFT is scheduled to have a meeting next Thursday, so that would be the 13th. They are scheduled to convene. Assuming that council voted to repeal that urban renewal area and disband LIFT, there is in the state statute a 6-month wind down provision. So they can't be disbanded sooner than 6 months. So they would presumably still meet on the 13th. The county certifies property tax, and there's no way to stop that process. So they will be getting another check. Most likely it's a relatively nominal amount, but they would be required to have to remit those monies as well. So I would anticipate at least 2 more meetings with LIFT if indeed this is the direction that council goes tonight. So Tiffany is here and she can talk about some of the finances if council has particular question, but the loan balance with interest is about $154,000. They currently hold $429,000 in their bank account. And so I guess I will turn it over to council if they have any specific questions for either myself or Tiffany.
Council, do you have any questions before we go to public comment?
I have a question. If there's a couple more meetings left throughout the year, are you going to be able to sustain those members coming back?
Yeah,
to
we had
fulfill their responsibility?
Not necessarily my responsibility. Assuming there was some drop-off, council would have the ability to appoint another member. Right now, one of the board members did resign on the night of the study session. upon learning the direction that council was taken. I feel pretty comfortable, just from a layperson outside observer, that the remaining board members, all 6 of them, are committed to following this through to the end. So I don't necessarily have any concerns about a fall off, but certainly if there is, then council would have to act to appoint someone for that position.
Okay, thanks.
One question, Reed. That $3,000 for legal cost, is that your department or is that the attorney they hired?
That would be the attorney that they hired who had appeared. I don't know if we've received a bill or if Lyft has received a bill for his services. Was a Mr. Malcolm Murray who had attended at least one of the meetings. So that's just an estimate. At some point, you know, we're looking at really 3 things that would have to happen, 4 things. So 1, they would meet to discuss the repayments and issue those checks. 2, most likely, there would have to be some sort of IGA between the city and Lyft to handle, it gets kind of technical, and I'm glad Tiffany's here because she's smart, but at some point, property taxes are delinquent, and so every once in a while, property taxes from 3 years ago may be remitted to a taxing entity, in this case, Lyft. So there could be a future check that came into Lyft after their dissolution, so most likely there would need to be some agreement in place that those checks would be forwarded on to the city and payable to the city if they were received.
And all those funds go back into the general fund, is that
They all
correct?
go back to the general fund. There are certain monies out of that 429 that are going to be remitted to certain taxing entities, but I think it's a relatively nominal amount. Most of it is sales tax increment.
Tiffany, can you confirm how much of that money would go back to the general fund?
Sure. Based on the $429,000 that's being held currently, after the disbursement of any property tax refunds that are due to the taxing districts, the repayment of the loan to the city, and then any estimated additional legal costs, which is the $3,000 that was mentioned earlier, and that's purely an estimate. I'm not sure what costs might come in related to that. There would be approximately $271,000 that potentially would come back to the city of Littleton.
Thank you.
Cool. Tiff, if you don't have anything else, we'll open it up to public hearing. Sure. Cool. I'll open it up to the public hearing. This is the time for the public to come down. You have 3 minutes. Do we have anybody who at least wish to speak? Please. We do have a list, and you are at the top of it.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Council. Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle in Littleton. You folks all know the dismal history of this thing. I'm not going to repeat all that. I'm simply here to remind you folks that 6 of you good folks on the 7th of January in your study session decided to ask City Attorney Betzing to write up the paperwork to make this happen, to dissolve Lyft. I simply want to remind you that 6 of you voted for that. It wasn't exactly a vote, but it was a sentiment to do that. He has done that. He's written up fine paperwork ordinance to make this happen. Please, let's make it happen. It's way past time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have, what is that, Martin, last name Martin? He had to leave, and he is in favor of abolishing. We have Carter Hill. Would you like to speak? Carter Hill is in favor of abolishing. We have Pete McIntosh. Pete here? Oh, Clintock, I'm sorry, I said McIntosh. What Paul said. No, I have nothing additional. Okay, thank you. He agrees with what Paul said. He was a yes. Ms. Brezak. Followed by Ms. Chadbourne.
I'm Carol Brezak. I live in the 4th District, and I'm speaking as a citizen, although I am a member of the Lyft Board. I wanted to clarify some statements that I heard prior to this meeting that I thought might be important for the board or the council to understand. There were comments about the fact that the Lift Board could borrow up to $1 million. There's a little caveat with that. The majority of our money, in fact, almost all of our money, comes from sales tax increment, and that has to be appropriated annually by this council. And the caveat is the banker or the bond person, whoever, wants a guarantee that that appropriation will happen for the next 20 years. And of course, that can't be done without a Tabor override, because this council can't appropriate money for all future councils. So the idea that we can borrow $1 million, it's there, but it's slim chance to none that we would be able to get it without an election. The infrastructure issue, that we could spend money and develop infrastructure in there, we actually asked staff a couple of times what infrastructure projects we could spend the money on, and we were told there were none that needed to be done. There was some talk about us doing something along the Bellevue corridor, the streetscape, but the Bellevue corridor, in fact, the boundary of the urban renewal area, goes to the sidewalk. It does not include the sidewalk, and it does not include the street. So that would be out of bounds. And there was a comment made about TIF being lost. Well, TIF's not being lost. TIF is only supposed to be created because the Urban Renewal Authority has created some activity, a project that has created the increment. Well, we've never created a project. All of the increment that we are collecting is coming from the businesses that are in that urban renewal area that are really doing a good job and growing their businesses. We got $102,000 worth of sales tax one year, I think it was last year, and that represents over $3 million in added sales in that small little area. So that's money that would have come to the city's general fund, whether Lyft existed or not. And with us going away, that money goes back to the general fund. So there's nothing being lost. If a project ever happens on the one area that really does need development, the sales tax, hopefully, well, if it's retail, there'll be increased sales tax, but if it's the property, commercial property and property taxes go up, that amount of money is going to come to the city as well. So there's no loss in revenue. It's just you don't have to divert it to urban renewal. It'll come directly to you and you'll get to keep it. I support the yes vote on this ordinance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. Okay.
I'm still Pam Chadbourne and live a block and a half from here. So thank you so much, Council, for bringing this up in January and for getting this out for a vote. Obviously, I've urged you to vote for repealing their urban renewal plan and abolishing the Lift Board. And that's because I think this board was doomed from the beginning. It had no project. I think the state law, the urban renewal authorities exist under state law. And I think the state law is pretty clear. Urban renewal exists to remove blight and slum and conditions that are immediately dangerous to the public. In 2013-14, the consultant blighted over 700 acres of Littleton, which I think I've never met anybody who said, oh yeah, we have slum and blight over 700 acres along Littleton Boulevard on Broadway and Bellevue. So from the beginning, it was a fishing expedition, I think is you throw out your line, you see what you can catch. It was never to cure slum and blight. It was doomed from the beginning because there wasn't slum and blight to cure, and because there was no project, no specific project. It's almost hopeless to begin on something if you don't know, and I'll refer back to my other comments, we don't know what we're going to build with the Envision project. It hasn't been stated. What is our vision for Littleton? We have no such shared thing. We had no project to accomplish, nothing to work toward with urban renewal. And so it was, I think, doomed. The specific site that's owned by And let's say Redwood Kairos, it is not owned by Carl Chang. I keep hearing people say, let's talk to Carl Chang. It is not a family thing. This is a real estate investment trust. It owns over 60, 70 multi-unit properties, medical, residential, dormitories. They must get millions in rent every month. And they have 5 properties that are in development, including Columbine Square. And this is part of their investment portfolio. This is not in their city, and the way that they regard this property is very different than we do. So please put this poor board out of its misery. It's gone on for 5 years without a project. If we ever in the future get something that's good for Littleton, if any project emerges that you can show us is going to be a huge benefit for us, let's consider urban renewal for that specific project accomplishing those goals for us. But please never do this fishing expedition thing again. Thanks.
Thank you. That is it for our list. Is there anybody else that would like to speak regarding this? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Council, would you like to discuss? Move to a motion? Karina.
I have a question for staff. There was a comment made by a citizen that LIF would not be able to borrow and obtain the incremental million plus dollars from financing. Could you speak to that on LIF's ability to borrow against a tax increment that would be generated and what your estimate is of that borrowing potential?
So are you referring to a public comment that was made earlier?
Yes.
So there is a provision that any debt that's issued, it has to have, and Reed might be able to help me here, I don't recall the wording exactly, but any payments that the city makes to LIFT are required to be appropriated annually by the city. So there is that clause that is required by the city of Littleton. There are debt mechanisms that potentially could be solicited or received that take that into account. I think part of that is a potential increase in interest rate that the entity might be able to receive because of that Colorado limitation required for Tabor. But there are mechanisms out there that could potentially be used to address that.
So the board would be able to borrow against the increment?
I think it just depends on who might be purchasing or loaning the money, purchasing bonds or loaning the money. It's just going to be a factor of that.
Anything else? Patrick?
Nope, I'm ready to make a motion.
Go for it.
We're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I move to approve the ordinance on second reading repealing the Columbine Square Urban Renewal Area and abolishing the Littleton Invest for Tomorrow Urban Renewal Authority.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council, go ahead.
I articulated my reasons for wanting to repeal LIFT at the study session that council had a few weeks back. I don't need to reiterate those. I do want to take an opportunity, though, to thank the LIFT board members, past and present, for their service to Littleton, so thank you.
Thank you very
How
much.
do you know it's going to pass?
Okay.
No, I'll support the motion.
No comment.
Did you want? Okay, cool. I just want to mention and thank the board members for the last 5 years who have served on there. And there's been over 20 board members on a seven folks on the board, but we've had over 7 members over the course of that 5 years. It's been a very frustrating event for those members. All of them have worked to try to work with the owners, but the owner just has not wanted to work with the city. They don't want to use the urban renewal tool that we have. I know that the most recent chairman worked very hard to get contact with the owners of the property, their agents, but it just didn't work out for anybody at this point. So we do have a motion and a second. Any more, Karina?
I have a comment.
Sure.
Okay. So I wanted to thank a citizen because I did get an email, and I appreciated the email. As he stated, he says. I'm not saying urban renewal is bad. It has been just fine in some places. What I'm against is LIFT. And there are two things that we're addressing tonight. We're addressing the repeal of urban renewal and the abolishment of LIFT, two very different things. And I think this really kind of calls out some of the frustration that we've heard in all of our discussions about the board and what they've been able to accomplish. And I do think it's important to look at the history. In the past 5 years, the board has been working in a very difficult environment in the city of Littleton. In the past 5 years, there have been 5 city attorneys. 2 of them were interim city attorneys. In 2015, the Columbine Square Plan was amended. In 2015, Initiative 300, limiting urban renewal in Littleton, passed. In 2016, 3 of the 4 urban renewal areas were repealed, a city manager was fired, an executive director resigned. It wasn't until 2017 that we got a new city attorney, a new city manager. The city began to operate more effectively, creating an environment where LIFT could begin to do the work that they were intended to do. But then in 2018, there was a fire in Columbine Square, a turnover in the board with 3 new board members appointed by the mayor and the mayor pro tem at the time. But there was progress. We adopted the Bellevue Corridor Vision to begin to give visibility, guidance, and direction of what could happen there. 2019, the LIFT board did begin to build, organize, and act. They conducted a business survey, and they presented to council. And so LIFT was beginning to be equipped and supported with what they were intending to do. As far as projects, I think we have all reached a conclusion that the one property, the Columbine Square property, was kind of, it wasn't moving forward. And so as, again, Ms. Brezak said tonight, requests were made to the city about infrastructure projects. Well, we now have passed our Transportation Mobility Board. And in the Transportation Mobility Board, we actually look at, there are 7 projects in this area worth over $4.9 million, and we don't have funding for that. In this area, there are roads and avenues that are considered pedestrian priority streets, Bellevue, bike priority streets, Federal and Low, and transit priority streets, Federal and Low. So to suggest that there are not infrastructure projects that we could implement here, does not appear to be the case given our newly adopted transportation mobility plan. And so with $1 to $2 million of available financing to actually begin to put these projects into place, I think we should absolutely continue to support the work that LIFT can and should be doing. And I think our city can begin to provide and tick off the box these many projects that we have to do in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm not going to support this ordinance. I have voiced that previously, and I ask our council to think about what our options are. We just had a retreat that really called into, brought to light the obligation that we have to improve infrastructure and how we need to begin to fund that. This is a source for us to beginning to fund those projects.
Councilor,
I have one question. If we were to let LIFT sunset, took a break and revisited maybe a similar model or a more specific urban renewal project, would that be a possibility, or once it's done, it's done?
I'm sorry, Ms. Milliman, is the question to repeal the Columbine Square urban renewal area but allow LIFT to continue as an entity?
Maybe that's one question, or maybe you let both of them go.
Or is it to do nothing tonight?
I guess, and I'm sorry, I'm new to this, I'm trying to understand, but if you abolish LIFT, let Columbine Square Urban Renewal go, take a break for a year, revisit, come back with a better plan on more specific projects that the transportation and master plan is addressing. It just sounds like there's a lot of, with this, this particular board.
So in
I'm probably not
terms,
making myself clear, sorry.
no, in terms of establishing maybe in the future a new urban renewal area, that certainly can be done. Littleton has, by way of charter, amended the charter so that it's going to require voter approval anytime that a new urban renewal area is going to be established that requires tax increment financing. So I would say, without forecasting the future, that has been a little challenging in Littleton's history over urban renewal. But that certainly is something that could happen in the future if a particular area was deemed by this council to be blighted. Then certainly another urban renewal area in the future could be established.
And I just want to remind council too that LIFT did have an executive director for many years, as well as a very experienced urban renewal attorney for many years. And we've had so many fine people on that board, and I hate to, they don't receive any of the credit for their frustration. They really did work hard to make this happen. We have an owner that's just completely disinterested. 5 years has passed, so it is now not attractive to a developer or an owner as far as the tax incentive relief that they could receive. So with that, we have a motion on the table. We have a motion, a yes vote would be to repeal the Columbine Urban Renewal Area and abolish the LIFT board. So that's a yes, and a no is in disagreement, so cast your vote.
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Elrod voting no. The motion carries.
Great. Thank you, council. All right, we're going to move on to, hang on one sec, please. All right, we're going to move on to, now just as a matter of process, how we're going to do things this time. We have two ordinances, and they're very related to each other. The Mayor Pro Tem is going to read both, so he's going to read the first one and then the second one. Then we're going to open it up to the city to do their presentation, and we can do some council questions at that time. We will also open it up to the public to address both ordinances. So we're just going to have the one public opportunity here. So that's the process we're going to be. So if the Mayor Pro Tem, if you could read both.
Ordinance 04-2020, an ordinance on second reading enacting a temporary moratorium on any new auto-oriented business development within the area as set forth in the Downtown Littleton Design Standards, and upon the submission, acceptance, processing, or approval of any site development plan, demolition permit, application, or plan approval, or other types of approval by the City of Littleton related to such activities. Ordinance 05-2020, an ordinance on second reading enacting a temporary moratorium on new development containing more than one residential unit within the downtown area as set forth in the Littleton Downtown Design Standards, and upon the submission, acceptance, processing, or approval of any site development plans, demolition permit, applications, or plan approvals, or other types of approval by the City of Littleton related to such activities.
Great, thank you. Staff?
Yes, Council. So we're considering two moratoriums this evening as set forth in the title. One relates to putting a stay, if you will, on the acceptance of applications relating to two different things. One is auto-oriented uses. And essentially, auto-oriented uses are any of those types of commercial uses that require an automobile and tend to increase traffic and reduce walkability. I think when council adopted the comprehensive plan in October of 2019, and when staff took a look at the comprehensive plan and started seeing how that fit in with some of the existing city codes, as well as our downtown design standards and operating standards, there appeared to be some inconsistencies between the application between one and another. The other moratorium tonight deals with a temporary stay on the acceptance of any applications dealing with multifamily, or in this case, anything over more than one residential unit. We're going to put a temporary stay on for 90 days while staff tries to address some of these inconsistencies between our existing processes, our existing zoning regulations, and the recently adopted comp plan. You know, when we adopt a moratorium, it's always important to be really narrow in terms of two things. Be really narrow in terms of the scope. So don't make this apply blanketly across the city. So we've tried to establish the particular area that we've seen our staff has identified the most substantial change happening right now, the most risk for change of character, and that's the downtown area. So we've used the downtown Littleton design standards as kind of the map as set forth in terms of where this particular, these two particular moratoriums would apply. And one of the other important things, aside from being really narrow in scope in application, is being really narrow in duration. So staff has identified a number of different changes within both of these moratorium that they believe they can accomplish to help dealing with some of those inconsistencies. So I have Mr. Michael Sutherland here from Community Development. If there are any specific questions in regard to what it is that staff hopes to address within this limited 90-day time frame. But that's all I really have in terms of tonight.
And staff is going to, again, make a clear distinction on each moratorium. Is that correct? Or is it various?
I guess, can you be more specific in terms of?
To be clear, that we're talking two ordinances. One is primarily for the auto-related. If you could, just make that very clear for us. And the second one is on the residential piece.
That's correct.
Cool. Thank you. City, staff?
I guess, Mr. Sutherland, if you want to be able to fill them in on what we're hoping to accomplish in this 90-day time period.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Mike Sutherland. I'm the Deputy Community Development Director. For the first ordinance, or one of the ordinances dealing with auto-oriented uses, staff is expecting to amend or propose an amendment to the city code that would make certain specific auto-oriented uses a conditional use in the downtown area. For the second moratorium, we would propose to change the city code and the design standards for downtown to address some best practices dealing with building heights and how we measure building heights, building setbacks, additional public engagement, and look at some issues like the design of slot homes and definitions related to slot homes, which seem to be a particular concern among residents and people who use the downtown area. So that's a brief summary of what we intend to look at during the moratorium period, and we will propose amendments to the city code to address that limited scope. And then outside of the moratorium, we can look at additional regulations that council is interested in related to overall heights and densities and those types of things.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions before we open up to the public? Yes.
Mike, there's, I believe, 7 projects currently that are grandfathered in? Is that correct?
Correct. There are, I believe there are, it may be 8. I think there are 7 residential projects and 1 commercial project.
Okay, and those, I'm sorry, those 7, can you tell us a little bit about those? Are those multifamily? What are slot homes? What are those?
Yes, so there are, of the 7 projects, of the 8 projects, 7 are residential. 1 is a extended stay hotel project. The 7 projects, several of them would be classified as slot homes, is how I would categorize them, not all of them. One of the citizens earlier this evening mentioned a project that is currently under review that has not been approved, but would replace the Scottish building on Alamo. That has been going very slowly, and the outcome of that is, I would say, fairly uncertain at this point. But those were all in the process before we discussed moratoriums, before we had these types of conversations. Some of them draw back even before the adoption of the comprehensive plan. And so quite a few of them are very close to the finish line, as it were, and stopping them at this point, we've talked with the city attorney, and that would be unadvisable.
You know, some of them have already received their entitlements, so they've gone through the site development plan. All they're awaiting is building permits, so they've already received the formal approval to begin their projects, so we can stop them in terms of them going on with their projects.
So to be clear, then, those 8 that have been submitted are not affected by this, is whether we wanted them to or not, they are not affected by whatever we do tonight.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mike, those don't have to come before council, correct?
Those are, by and large, they're site development plans, so they do not appear before city council.
Because they meet the codes as they currently stand.
Correct. The site development plans are administrative approvals, and if they meet the code requirements, staff will approve them. It's possible that staff, as Mr. Betzing said, several of these are already approved. The ones that are fairly close to approval, you know, there could be a chance that staff might deny them, and the applicant could appeal that to the Planning Commission.
But if they were denied, it's under the current, not any potential next moratorium.
That is correct.
Cool. All right. Who else, Scott?
I just want to,
Go ahead.
I just want to be abundantly clear here. So this is a question for the city attorney. These developments that are already in process, and in particular those that have already received their entitlements, there's nothing council could do, even if we're frustrated by this, even if we wanted to prevent those developments or change the course of those developments at this point.
Correct. Not without a heavy risk of litigation. We have our own entitlement language ordinance. There's also a state law which also provides for entitlements.
I have a question. Mike, did these come in when the design standards were adopted or before?
Most of the projects came in after the design standards were adopted. There may be 1 or 2 of those residential projects that came in when the design standards were actually guidelines. But that change occurred late 2017 or early 2018.
So they adhere to the design standards pretty much?
Yes.
You know, and I guess the only other thing I would throw in, just to show kind of the need and necessity for a moratorium, is over the past several years as we look at the downtown Littleton area, we look at the number of projects that have come in, And we're talking 22 of the 24 projects that have come in have all been multifamily. And so obviously that's a concern for a lot of members of the city and city council as it goes to changing some of the character that a lot of us have come to love and are familiar with in the downtown Littleton area. So needing to kind of curtail that kind of consistent change while we get more established processes in place is advisable at this time.
Great, thank you. All right, let's open it up to a public hearing. First one on the list, you've already had a chance to speak earlier, so we're going to move on from there. But we do have, I guess it's Mr. Morton on Alamo Street. Did he make it back? He did not make it back, but he is in favor of this resolution. And then we have Mr. McClintock. Would you? Thank you. And he too is in favor of the resolution. And then we have Ms. Chadbourne in favor of the resolution.
So, still living a block and a half from here, I'm very interested in this moratorium, and I thank you for considering it and hope you pass it. I think we need stronger controls, and I will mention Councilmember Grove's comments at the study session. She said, why aren't we being more strict in the measures that we're considering for this interim between the end of the moratorium and the time in 18 months, around that time when we adopt new code? Shouldn't we be stricter and then loosen that? And that's what I'm gonna say I think makes sense. It's not what I've heard so far, so I'm concerned about that. But the moratorium is necessary because of the changes that have occurred in downtown, and they're destructive to the character that we have established. I've talked to some of the people who live in the new stack houses, and a couple of them are quite clear. They like the mixed character, and that means the older homes as well as the newer stuff. If the whole downtown became these stack homes, they wouldn't like that. They think that would change what they moved here for. So even they don't want more of what they're living in. But I'm going to say from the city's point of view, it's horrible to have all stack homes, and I wrote this to this council in an earlier email. We have rezoned many acres over the past, tens, almost 100 acres, over the past 7-8 years. And almost all of them have been built with these stack homes. Now I'm going to ask you, if you were a council member walking in 25, 30 years, and you're inheriting a city with these 30, 40 middle-aged stack houses all over the city, is that an asset for you? I don't think so. We have too many of these. They are age-restricted. People with young children can't live in them. People who are going to babysit young children for their other family members or friends can't live in them. And older people can't live in them. They are not accessible to most people or many people. So they're not a very strong housing option, and we're putting them everywhere. In fact, giving rezonings to let these things be built. We need a moratorium, and we need restrictive policies in the interim before the code changes are made, because downtown is near a light rail station. We need accessible, universal design, things that are on one floor without bumps in the floor and stuff like that, for people who are handicapped, for people who have to use light rail, who have no option. They've got to have transit. That needs to be affordable, again, for these same people who are using light rail. We have no measures for that, not even in the new comp plan. We just haven't done our work here. Moratorium is a good start. Please pass it. Thanks.
Thank you. That is it for the names. Or anybody else who would like to speak that is not signed up? Mr. Atwood. I think he's a hurting unit there.
Good evening. My name is Frank Atwood, and what you see displayed is a wing nut that Chuck Reed gave me. And so my comments may be a little tangential, but I too oppose the slot homes. I'm grateful for the moratorium being considered, and I'm concur that the character of Littleton is dying. And in a international context, rumor has it that there's a coronavirus out there that may cost, I'm not certain of his title, but the Chinese top dog his job because he did not start quarantines fast enough and early enough.
Is this related to our?
Yes, I'm discussing the character of Littleton dying, and I'm saying that may cost Zai his job, and who knows how many of council members it may cost you your jobs also. So just a tangential wingnut comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Anybody else would like to speak? With that, I close the public hearing. Staff, did you have anything else you wanted to add? If
No,
not,
sir.
council, any questions, or I'm looking for a motion?
I'd like to motion. I move to approve the ordinance. It's the first one. The ordinance on second reading imposing a temporary moratorium on any new auto-oriented business development within the area set forth in the downtown Littleton design standards. And upon the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of any site development plans, demolition permit applications, or plan approvals, or other types of approval by the city of Littleton related to such activities.
Second.
We have a motion, and I think Ms. Grove was the second on that. Council discussion. Yes?
I have an amendment. Would this be the appropriate time?
Sure.
Okay. So I have an amendment to this particular ordinance. I had mentioned this at our study session as well. In Exhibit A, auto-oriented uses. So what we are seeking to do here is to identify those uses that are auto-oriented. My amendment is bullet 1, to add, the new bullet 1 should read, financial services such as banks, savings and loans, and brokerages that feature drive-up or drive-through services. So I'm adding that feature, drive-up or drive-through services to specify.
We have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second, Mr. Driscoll. All right, any council discussion? All right, so yes vote is to add please give me what you're adding the words again.
So the new bullet would read, financial services such as banks, savings and loans, and brokerages, and I'm adding, that feature drive-up or drive-through services.
Great, so a yes vote is to approve that, and no vote is?
Hold on. Can I ask a question of Mike here? Mike, what was the staff's concern with financial services, banks, savings and loans, brokerages, et cetera, that do not feature drive-through services?
Thank you, Councilmember Mellon. The staff's concern when we put that category in was that most of the banks and financial institutions we see do feature drive-through service. We don't have any problem with banks banks coming in that don't have that, for example. So yeah, we don't. That's, to me, it seems like a good amendment. It follows the spirit of what we were trying to achieve. It's just that most of the financial institutions we have seen in the past do feature some sort of auto-oriented aspect.
Councilmember Elrod, could I ask you to sort of give your thinking in wanting the amendment? Is it similar to what Mike is saying?
So the amendment is to support is to clarify the reason why they were added here to begin with, which is because we don't want to encourage auto-oriented uses, banks that have a drive-through would be more conducive to auto-oriented uses. So that's why the specificity is necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Council, any other questions? Again, a yes vote is to add to bullet number 1 that features drive-up or drive-through services. That's a yes vote, and no vote is to oppose.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion to amend carries unanimously.
And we have a main motion as, and amended. Ready for a vote. A yes vote would be.
A second on that?
Well, yes, we did on the main vote, yes. So we do have a main motion as amended, so that's what we're voting on now. Yes vote is to approve the temporary moratorium on the auto-oriented business development as amended. Yes vote, and a no vote is opposed.
The vote on the amended main motion is 7-0. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our second moratorium, which Mayor Pro Tem has read, and it's ordinance number 05-2020. And we have already had our discussion, so now, council, it's up to us now I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve the ordinance on second reading enacting a temporary moratorium on new development containing more than one residential unit within the area as set forth in the Downtown Littleton Design Standards, and upon the submission, acceptance, processing, or approval of any site development plans, demolition permit applications, or plan approvals, or other types of approval by the City of Littleton related to such activities.
Second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Council, any discussion?
Second.
All right, so a yes vote for ordinance 05-2020 is in regards to the temporary moratorium on the new development containing more than one residential unit. Yes vote in favor and a no vote is opposed.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, council. And we have no further business, and with that, it is 7:44. We are adjourned.
That's a record.